Evelyn Vance adjusted the collar of her starch-stiff uniform, wincing as the rough fabric rubbed against the nape of her neck. It was 7:45 p.m. at the Obsidian, and her feet were already throbbing in her cheap black non-slip shoes. "Table 4, Evelyn, VIPs. Don't mess this up, or it's your head," hissed Marcus, the floor manager. Marcus was a man who sweated profusely, even in air conditioning, his anxiety radiating off him like heat waves. "It's the Moretti party." Evelyn's stomach dropped. In this city, you didn't need to watch the news to know who the Morettis were. They were the invisible current running through the city's underground electric grid. And Dante Moretti was the lightning. "I've got it, Marcus. Please, I need the tips tonight. Leo's surgery is next week," Evelyn whispered, tucking a stray lock of chestnut hair behind her ear. She picked up the heavy tray, balancing 3 crystal flutes of vintage champagne and a bottle of sparkling water. She took a deep breath. She wasn't Evelyn Vance, the girl drowning in medical debt for her little brother. Tonight, she was a ghost. Invisible. Efficient. Silent. She navigated the floor, weaving through tables occupied by senators, tech moguls, and A-list celebrities. But the atmosphere changed when she approached Table 4, the secluded booth in the back, draped in velvet shadows. 3 men in dark suits stood near the perimeter security. At the table sat Dante Moretti. He looked different than the blurry paparazzi photos. He was younger, perhaps 32, with hair the color of midnight, and eyes that looked like shattered ice. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him with lethal precision. He wasn't speaking. He was simply watching the room with a predator's boredom. Next to him sat Vanessa Thorne. The daughter of a corrupt real estate tycoon, Vanessa was the kind of beautiful that felt sharp to the touch. She was wearing a red dress that looked like it was painted on, and she was currently scrolling through her phone with an air of aggressive disinterest. "Your champagne, sir, madam," Evelyn said, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. Dante didn't look up. He merely tapped a finger on the table. Vanessa, however, sighed loudly. "Finally. I thought you had to go to France to stomp the grapes yourself." Evelyn forced a smile. "Apologies for the wait, Miss Thorne." She placed the flutes down. 1 for Dante, 1 for Vanessa. "Wait," Vanessa snapped. Evelyn froze. "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa peered into her glass. "There is a smudge on this rim. Do you see it?" Evelyn leaned in. The glass was pristine. I'm afraid I don't, ma'am. It was polished just now." "Are you calling me a liar?" Vanessa's voice raised an octave sharp enough to cut through the low hum of conversation nearby. "No, never. I'll replace it immediately." Evelyn reached for the glass. "Don't bother," Vanessa huffed, snatching the glass herself. "Just pour. I'm parched and Dante is being a bore." Evelyn moved to pour the champagne. As she tilted the bottle, Vanessa shifted abruptly, throwing her arm out to gesture at something on her phone. Her elbow knocked Evelyn's wrist. The bottle slipped. It was a slow-motion nightmare. The heavy green glass didn't shatter, but the champagne, hundreds of dollars worth of Dom Perignon, cascaded out. It missed Dante entirely. But it splashed right onto the hem of Vanessa's crimson dress. For a second there was total silence. Then Vanessa shrieked. It was a primal, rage-filled sound. She shot up from her chair, her face twisting into a mask of pure ugliness. "You stupid, clumsy little rat!" Vanessa screamed. Before Evelyn could even stammer an apology, before she could grab a napkin, Vanessa's hand lashed out. Crack! The slap was backhanded, fueled by the weight of a heavy diamond ring. It caught Evelyn on the cheekbone just below her eye. The force of it knocked Evelyn sideways. She stumbled, losing her footing on the slick floor, and crashed onto her knees, sending the tray clattering loudly across the marble. The restaurant went dead silent. The jazz pianist stopped mid-chord. Evelyn brought a hand to her face. Her cheek was burning, a wet, stinging heat spreading rapidly. She tasted copper blood. Tears pricked her eyes, not from sadness, but from the shock of the pain. "Look at me," Vanessa screeched, looming over her. "This is custom Versace. You are going to pay for this. I will have you fired. I will have you sued. I will have you on the street, begging for change." "Marcus." The manager came running, his face pale as a sheet. "Miss Thorne." "Mr. Moretti." "I am so sorry. She's new. She's incompetent. Evelyn, get up. Get out of here." Evelyn tried to scramble to her feet, her head spinning. She hit my arm. I didn't. Shut up." Vanessa raised her hand again, ready for a second strike. "You ruined my night." Evelyn flinched, closing her eyes, waiting for the blow. But it never came. "That's enough." The voice was low baritone and calm. It wasn't shouted yet. It carried more weight than Vanessa's screaming ever could. Evelyn opened one eye. Dante Moretti had risen from his seat. He hadn't moved quickly. He had simply stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with a slow, deliberate motion. He caught Vanessa's wrist in mid-air, inches from Evelyn's face. His grip didn't look tight, but Vanessa was frozen, her eyes widening in sudden confusion. "Dante!" Vanessa blinked. "Let go. She ruined my dress." Dante didn't look at Vanessa. He looked down. For the first time that night, the Ice King looked at the waitress. His eyes swept over Evelyn, her messy hair, the trembling of her shoulders, the cheap uniform, and finally the angry red welt rising on her cheek where the diamond had cut the skin. Something flashed in Dante's eyes. It wasn't pity. It was something much darker. The silence in the obsidian was suffocating. People were holding their breath. In the world of the New York elite, witnessing a scene like this was rare. Witnessing Dante Moretti involved in a scene like this was dangerous. Dante released Vanessa's wrist. He did it with a dismissive flick, as if he were discarding a used tissue. "Sit down, Vanessa," Dante said softly. "But sit down." The command cracked like a whip. Vanessa sat her mouth agape, her face flushing a deep, embarrassed red to match her dress. Dante stepped around the table. He moved with the grace of a panther, silent and terrifying. He stopped in front of Evelyn, who was still on her knees amidst the spilled champagne and broken glass. Marcus, the manager, was shaking so hard, his teeth were practically chattering. "Mr. Moretti, please allow me to handle this trash. I will have the police escort her out immediately. She assaulted your fiancé." Dante turned his head slowly to look at Marcus. "Did you see her assault anyone, Marcus?" Marcus stammered. "Well, the dress, the spill. I saw a woman spill a drink," Dante said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "And then I saw another woman commit battery." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Dante turned back to Evelyn. He extended a hand. It was large, tanned, and manicured. "Stand up." Evelyn looked at the hand, then up at his face. Fear gripped her throat. If she touched him, would she disappear? Was this a trick? But the look in his eyes wasn't angry. It was intense, searching. She reached out her small, rough hand, taking his. He pulled her up effortlessly. She was light, too thin, he noted. She smelled like vanilla soap and exhaustion. "Look at me," he commanded. Evelyn forced herself to meet his gaze. Up close, his eyes were a startling shade of grey flecked with gold. Dante reached out and with his thumb gently tilted her chin upward. The touch was electric. Evelyn gasped softly. He inspected the cut on her cheek. It was bleeding sluggishly. "You're bleeding," he stated. It's fine, sir." "I'm fine," Evelyn whispered. "I just want to clean up the mess." "Leave the glass," Dante ordered. He turned to Vanessa, who was fuming silently in the booth. "Dante, what are you doing?" Vanessa hissed, dropping her voice so the neighboring tables wouldn't hear. "She's a nobody. Why are you touching her?" Dante pulled a pristine white silk handkerchief from his breast pocket. He turned back to Evelyn and gently pressed it against her cheek. "Hold this," he said. Evelyn held the cloth, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Sir, I really need this job. Please don't let them fire me." Dante ignored her plea, turning his full attention to the table. He looked at the waiter standing nearby. "Bring the bill." "Dante." Vanessa stood up again. "We haven't even ordered dinner. We have reservations at the club after this." "You can't be serious." "The evening is over, Vanessa," Dante said coldly. "Because of her," Vanessa pointed a manicured finger at Evelyn. "Because this clumsy waitress ruined my Versace." Dante took a step toward Vanessa. He invaded her personal space, towering over her. The menace rolling off him was palpable. "No," Dante said, his voice drop-dead quiet. "Because I don't break bread with people who abuse those they consider beneath them. It shows a lack of discipline, and it shows a lack of class." Vanessa's jaw dropped. You're taking her side over me. I'm your fiancé." "Not anymore," Dante said. The words hung in the air, heavy. "Final." Vanessa laughed nervously. "Stop joking. My father will receive a call from me in the morning, explaining why his daughter is no longer suitable to carry the Moretti name." Dante turned his back on her. He looked at Marcus. "You were going to fire her." Marcus gulped. It's company policy for damages." "What is her name?" "Evelyn. Evelyn Vance." Dante repeated the name. Evelyn. It rolled off his tongue like a secret. "Well, Marcus," Dante said, adjusting his cuffs, "if Evelyn is not employed here by tomorrow morning, I will buy this building, burn it to the ground, and build a parking lot on top of it. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, Mr. Moretti." "Absolutely. She is employee of the month," Marcus squeaked. Dante turned back to Evelyn. She was staring at him wide-eyed, the silk handkerchief stained with her blood. "Get your coat, Evelyn," Dante said. What? You're done for the night. You need a doctor for that cut, and you're not taking the subway home." I can't go with you," Evelyn said, her survival instincts kicking in. "I don't know you." Dante smiled. It was a small, rare thing, sharp at the edges, but undeniably captivating. "Everyone knows me, Miss Vance. But you're right. You don't know me. Which is why you're going to let me drive you to the hospital, and then I'm going to drop you off at your door. Nothing more." He leaned in closer, his voice a murmur only she could hear. "Unless you want to stay here with the manager who wanted to fire you and the woman who wants to claw your eyes out." Evelyn looked past him. Vanessa was making a call on her cell phone, her eyes shooting daggers at Evelyn. Marcus was glaring at her with a mix of fear and resentment. She looked back at Dante. He was dangerous, yes, but in that moment, he was the only shield she had. "Okay," she whispered. Dante offered his arm. "Shall we?" As they walked out of the restaurant, leaving a stunned Vanessa and a terrified staff in their wake, Evelyn felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her back. She had walked into the Obsidian as a nobody. She was walking out on the arm of the devil himself. But as they reached the cool night air, and a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb, Evelyn didn't realize that the slap was the least of her problems. She had just caught the attention of the most possessive man in New York, and Dante Moretti didn't just help people. He collected them. As the car door closed, sealing them in the quiet dark, Dante turned to her. "Now," he said, the darkness hiding his expression, "tell me about the man you're working so hard to save. Tell me about Leo." Evelyn's blood ran cold. She had never mentioned Leo's name. How did he know? The interior of the limousine was a vacuum sucking out the noise and chaos of the New York streets. It was cleaner than any hospital Evelyn had ever visited, smelling of supple Italian leather and a faint, expensive cologne that reminded her of cedarwood and cold steel. The windows were tinted so darkly that the city outside was reduced to streaks of blurred neon light. Evelyn sat pressed against the door, as far away from Dante Moretti as the confined space allowed. Her heart was beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a trapped bird trying to batter its way out. "Tell me about Leo." Those 4 words echoed in the silence louder than any shout. The slap from Vanessa had stung her skin, but this question pierced right through to her soul. Leo was her secret, her burden, her entire world. He was 16, fighting acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and he was the reason she worked 60-hour weeks on her feet until they bled. She hadn't told Marcus, the manager. She hadn't told any of the other waitresses. "How?" Evelyn's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, trying to find a shred of the toughness she used to survive the late-night shifts. "How do you know that name?" Dante didn't answer immediately. He reached for a cut crystal decanter housed in a polished wood console and poured a small amount of amber liquid into a heavy glass. He didn't offer her any. "I make it my business to know the people who handle my food." "Miss Vance," Dante said, taking a slow sip. His gaze was fixed forward towards the partition separating them from the driver, especially when they are trembling so hard they can barely hold a tray. Evelyn felt a flush of humiliation. "I was nervous. It's a high-pressure job." "No," Dante corrected, gently turning his head to look at her. In the dim cabin lighting, his eyes were abyssal. "Marcus is nervous. You are desperate. There is a distinct difference in the smell." He set the glass down with a soft clink. The sound felt impossibly loud. "You've been watching me," she whispered, the realization dawning with chilling clarity. "It wasn't just tonight. I observe my surroundings. It's a survival mechanism." He leaned back, crossing his long legs. "I noticed you 3 weeks ago. You had dark circles under your eyes that makeup couldn't hide. You were thinner than the month before, and you checked your phone every 4 minutes when you thought no one was looking." Evelyn instinctively gripped her phone tighter in her apron pocket. It was her lifeline to Leo's doctors. "You're invasive," she spat out, fear momentarily giving way to anger. "You have no right." Dante's expression didn't change. He wasn't threatened by her anger. He seemed mildly amused by it. "Rights are illusions for people who cannot enforce their will," he stated calmly. "I have resources. I used them." Evelyn Vance, age 24. Legal guardian of Leo Vance, age 16. Currently residing in a substandard 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. Behind on rent by 2 months. and drowning in approximately $80,000 of medical debt not covered by your basic insurance. Every fact was a blow. It was her life laid bare, stripped of dignity. She felt naked, violated by his knowledge. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and fast, spilling over before she could stop them. They stung the cut on her cheek. "What do you want from me?" she choked out. "Why are you doing this? Is this some kind of sick game for rich people? Vanessa slaps me, and you psychologically torture me." Dante reached into his jacket again. Evelyn flinched, half expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out the silk handkerchief again, a fresh one this time. He leaned across the seat. The sudden proximity was overwhelming. His heat invaded her space. He didn't hand her the cloth. He gently dabbed the tears from her face, careful to avoid the cut. His touch was confusing. It was possessive yet strangely gentle. Vanessa is a child throwing tantrums in a world of adults. Dante murmured, his eyes tracking the movement of his hand on her face. "She is irrelevant now. You are not." "Why am I relevant?" she whispered, unable to look away from his intense gaze. "Because," Dante said, his voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated through the leather seat, "I despise wasted potential, and I despise seeing something valuable being crushed by weight it shouldn't have to carry." He pulled back, leaving her skin tingling where he had touched her. "We're arriving at the hospital. Dr. Aris is the best plastic surgeon in the city. He'll ensure that cut doesn't leave a scar." "A plastic surgeon?" Evelyn blinked, confused by the sudden shift. "It's just a scratch. I just need a butterfly bandage." "You handle my champagne. Your face is part of the presentation. I won't have it marred by Vanessa's incompetence." The car slowed down. They weren't pulling up to the emergency room entrance of a public hospital. They were entering a private underground garage, bright with fluorescent lights that felt harsh after the dim intimacy of the limo. The car stopped. The driver opened Dante's door instantly. Dante stepped out and offered his hand again. "Come, Evelyn. Let's get you fixed." It wasn't a request. It was a directive, and as Evelyn took his hand, she realized with a sickening lurch that she had traded the frying pan of poverty for a fire she didn't even understand yet. He knew everything about her, and she knew nothing about him except that he could destroy her life with a snap of his fingers, or perhaps save it. St. Jude's private medical center was less like a hospital and more like a five-star hotel lobby that happened to smell faintly of antiseptic. There were no crying babies, no crowded waiting rooms with coughing patients, no endless forms to fill out on clipboards. As soon as Dante walked through the private entrance with Evelyn in tow, the atmosphere shifted. Two nurses at the reception desk immediately stood up, their postures straightening reflexively. A man in an expensive suit, Dr. Aris presumably, came rushing out of an office, looking as terrified as Marcus the restaurant manager had been. "Mr. Moretti," the doctor said breathlessly, extending a hand, which Dante shook briefly. "We weren't expecting you. Is everything all right? Are you injured?" "Not me," Dante said, guiding Evelyn forward with a hand on the small of her back. The heat of his palm burned through her thin uniform shirt. "Miss Vance had an unfortunate encounter with some jewelry. Fix it." "Of course. Immediately. Right this way." Evelyn was led into an examination room that was bigger than her living room. It had mahogany cabinets and art on the walls. For the next 20 minutes, Evelyn sat on a plush examination table, while Dr. Aris treated her like porcelain. He cleaned the cut with gentle precision, murmuring apologies every time she winced. He applied a sterile adhesive compound that he promised would knit the skin perfectly without stitches. Throughout the entire process, Dante stood in the corner of the room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't pace. He just waddled. He watched the doctor's hands. He watched Evelyn's wincing. He watched the way she nervously twisted her apron in her lap. His silence was heavier than any conversation. It was a weighing, a measuring. When the doctor was finished, he gave Evelyn a small silver tube of cream. Apply this twice daily. In a week, you won't even know it happened. Thank you, doctor, Evelyn said, her voice small. Dr. Aris turned to Dante. All done, Mr. Moretti. Shall I bill your usual account? Yes, and add a generous donation to the pediatric wing in Miss Vance's name. Evelyn's head snapped up. What? No, you don't have to do that. Dante ignored her nodding at the doctor. We're leaving. Back in the limousine, the dynamic had shifted again. The fear Evelyn felt was now mixed with a heavy, suffocating sense of debt. He had saved her job, defended her honor, taken her to a private surgeon, and donated money in her name. In Evelyn's world, nobody did anything for free. The bill always came due. Where to? Dante asked. Queens, she said quietly. She gave him the address. It was a neighborhood people like Dante Moretti only saw on the news when something bad happened. The drive was long. As they crossed the bridge and the gleaming towers of Manhattan receded behind them, the streets became rougher, the buildings shorter and grimier. Dante seemed completely at ease as the scenery changed, as if he owned the crumbling brick tenements just as much as he owned the skyscrapers. When the limo pulled up in front of her building, Evelyn felt a fresh wave of shame. It was a 4-story walk-up with peeling brown paint and a front door that didn't always lock properly. A couple of guys hanging out on the stoop stopped talking and stared open-mouthed at the sleek black car blocking the street. Thank you for everything tonight, Evelyn said, reaching for the door handle, desperate to escape his overwhelming presence. You really didn't have to. Wait. Dante didn't raise his voice, but the command froze her instantly. He turned his body toward her. The ambient light from a street lamp outside cast half his face in shadow, making him look even more severe. We need to discuss the future, he said. My future? Evelyn asked warily. I'm going to go to work tomorrow. I'm going to keep my head down. I promise you'll never have a problem with me at the restaurant again. I'm not talking about the restaurant, Evelyn. He said her name with a familiarity that made her shiver. I'm talking about Leo. The air left the car. Leo has surgery scheduled for next Tuesday. Dante continued reciting the facts coldly. The copay for the procedure and the subsequent 6 weeks of targeted chemotherapy is $25,000. Money you don't have. Money you won't make in tips, even if you work until you collapse. Evelyn began to shake. It was true. She had been denied another loan yesterday. She was praying for a miracle, and instead she got the devil. How do you know the exact day? She whispered, horrified. I own the debt collection agency that holds your current medical bills, Dante revealed calmly. I bought your file this morning. Evelyn felt sick. He didn't just know about her debt, he owned it. He owned her fear. What do you want? She begged, tears spilling again. I don't have anything. You saw where I live. I have nothing to give you. Dante leaned in closer. His eyes caught the light, hard and glittering like diamonds. You have something I very much need right now, he said softly. You have anonymity. You are desperate, and you are entirely dependent on my whim. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. It had only a number on it, embossed in silver. He pressed it into her trembling palm. Vanessa was a strategic error. Her public display tonight made me look weak, uncontrolled. I need to rectify that immediately. I need a replacement. Someone who understands obedience. Someone who understands the stakes. Evelyn stared at the card, her mind racing, unable to comprehend what he was suggesting. Tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m., a car will pick you up. You will come to my office and we will discuss the terms of your employment. Not as a waitress. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle over her like a shroud. I'm going to pay for Leo's surgery. All of it. I will wipe your slate clean. In exchange, you belong to me for 1 year. You will do what I say, when I say it, wear what I tell you to wear, and stand where I tell you to stand. You want me to be your mistress? Evelyn breathed revulsion, warring with desperation. Dante laughed, a low, dark sound that held no humor. Mistress, no, Evelyn. That's too messy. I want you to be my fiancée. Evelyn watched the tail lights of the limousine dissolve into the red haze of the Queen's traffic. She stood on the cracked pavement in her work shoes, clutching the black business card so tightly, its sharp edges dug into her palm. The street was loud, sirens wailing in the distance, the bass of a passing car rattling the windows. But inside Evelyn, there was a terrified silence. Fiancé. The word tasted like ash. It wasn't a proposal of love. It was a business acquisition. Dante Moretti hadn't looked at her with affection. He had looked at her the way a wolf looks at a wounded deer, calculating exactly how much effort it would take to bring it down. She turned and pushed open the heavy front door of her building. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and old cigarettes. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, buzzing like an angry insect. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her legs feeling like lead. When she unlocked the door to apartment 3B, the sound of coughing greeted her. It was a wet, rattling sound that seemed to scrape against the walls. Evelyn dropped her bag and ran to the second bedroom. Leo was sitting up in bed, hunched over a plastic bucket. He was 16, but in the dim light of the bedside lamp, he looked 12. His skin was the color of parchment, translucent enough to see the blue map of veins beneath. The chemotherapy had taken his hair months ago. Now the leukemia was taking his spirit. "Elle!" Leo gasped, wiping his mouth with the back of a trembling hand. "You're home late." Evelyn forced a smile onto her face, masking the terror that was clawing at her throat. She sat on the edge of the bed, reaching out to rub his back. "It was a busy night at the restaurant, Leo. VIPs. Lots of cleaning up. Did you get the tips?" Leo asked, his eyes large and fearful. He knew about the money. He knew about the notices in the mail. He carried the guilt of his own survival, and it was crushing him faster than the cancer. "I did," Evelyn lied. "I made a lot tonight." She looked at the nightstand. The bottle of anti-nausea medication was empty. There was a prescription slip next to it unfilled because she didn't have the $40 for the copay until her next paycheck. Leo lay back against the pillows, his breathing shallow. "I'm tired, Elle. I'm really tired." "I know, buddy. You just sleep." "The doctor called today," Leo whispered, closing his eyes. "I heard Mum talking to him on the phone before she left." Evelyn stiffened. Their mother had walked out 6 months ago, unable to handle the stress, leaving Evelyn to shoulder the burden alone. Leo was confused, drifting in and out of memories. "What did the doctor say?" "Leo." "He said If we don't do the surgery soon, the counts are too low. He said maybe we should look at hospice. The word hung in the humid air of the small room. Hospice. It meant giving up. It meant morphine and waiting for the end. Evelyn stood up and walked to the kitchen. She turned on the tap to drown out the sound of her own sobbing. She leaned over the sink, gripping the porcelain until her knuckles turned white. $80,000. That was the price of her brother's life. She looked down at the counter. A stack of red envelopes sat there. Final warnings, eviction notices, medical collections. Then she opened her hand. The black card with silver embossing caught the light. Dante Moretti. He was a monster. Everyone in New York knew the rumors. He was a man who moved in shadows, who treated the law as a suggestion. To agree to his terms was to sign a deal with the devil. But as she heard Leo cough again, a weak, painful sound that broke her heart into 1,000 pieces, Evelyn knew she had already lost. She didn't have the luxury of morality. She didn't have the luxury of fear. She picked up her phone. It was 1:00 a.m. She dialed the number on the card. It rang once. "Miss Vance," Dante's voice answered immediately. He was awake. He sounded as clear and cold as he had in the car. He had been expecting her call. "I'll do it," Evelyn whispered into the dark kitchen. "Good," Dante replied. There was no triumph in his voice, only the satisfaction of a prediction coming true. "Be ready at 9:00 a.m. Pack a bag. You won't be coming back to that apartment." "What about Leo?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Leo will be moved to St. Jude's private wing by noon tomorrow. His surgery is booked for Tuesday. Pack his things, too." The line went dead. Evelyn sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She had just sold her life for a year. She was going to be the property of the most dangerous man in the city. But as she listened to the silence of the apartment, she realized she would have sold her soul to the devil 1,000 times over if it meant Leo would live to see 17. The car that arrived at 9:00 a.m. was not a limousine. It was a massive armored SUV, black as oil, with tinted windows that looked bulletproof. The driver was a mountain of a man named Silas. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow and spoke only 2 words to Evelyn as he loaded her 2 battered suitcases and Leo's duffel bag into the trunk. "Get in." Leo was already gone. A private ambulance arranged by Dante had picked him up an hour earlier. Evelyn had hugged him goodbye, promising she would see him that evening, lying to him that she had gotten a new job as a live-in personal assistant for a wealthy executive. It was a lie that tasted like bile, but it was necessary. The drive to Manhattan was silent. Silas drove with aggressive precision, weaving through traffic as if the other cars were merely obstacles to be bullied out of the way. They pulled up to the Moretti Tower in the financial district. It was a monolith of black glass and steel, tearing into the sky like a jagged shard. It looked less like an office building and more like a fortress. "Top floor," Silas grunted, escorting her to a private elevator in the back that required a retinal scan to open. Evelyn stepped inside. The elevator rose so fast her ears popped. When the doors slid open, she wasn't in a hallway. She was directly in the penthouse office. The room was vast, bordered entirely by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a godlike view of the city. The furniture was sparse, modern and expensive, black leather, chrome, dark wood. The air was chilled to a temperature that made Evelyn shiver in her thin cardigan. Dante sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single block of obsidian. He was on the phone, speaking rapid-fire Italian. He didn't look up when she entered. He simply raised a hand, pointing a finger at the chair opposite him. "Sit." Evelyn sat. She folded her hands in her lap to hide the shaking. She felt incredibly small in this room, like an insect trapped in a glass jar. Dante hung up the phone. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He opened a leather folder on his desk and slid a thick stack of papers across the polished surface toward her. "The contract," Dante said. Evelyn looked at the document. Cohabitation and engagement agreement was printed in bold at the top. "You have a lawyer?" Dante asked, though the tone suggested he knew she didn't. "No. I've had my counsel draft this to be fair, but comprehensive." Dante stood up and walked around the desk. He leaned against the edge, crossing his arms, looking down at her. "Read it." Evelyn picked up the heavy paper. Her eyes skimmed the legalese catching phrases that made her stomach turn. Party B, Evelyn Vance, agrees to portray the fiancé of Party A, Dante Moretti, in all public and private capacities as deemed necessary. Party B will reside at the primary residence of Party A. Absolute fidelity is required. Any interaction with the opposite sex must be approved. Non-disclosure agreement regarding the nature of the relationship, punishable by... Evelyn looked up, her face pale. Punishable by financial ruin and litigation. Standard clause, Dante said smoothly. But let's be clear, Evelyn. If you betray me, if you sell a story to the press, if you are seen with another man, lawsuits will be the least of your worries. The threat hung in the air, cold and sharp. "You own me," she whispered. "For 12 months, Dante corrected. "In exchange, Leo gets the best care in the world. I've already wired the deposit to the hospital. The surgery is paid for. The chemo is paid for. If he needs a bone marrow transplant, I will find a donor, and I will buy the marrow. I will keep him alive. That is my side of the bargain." He leaned closer, his scent of cedar and danger wrapping around her. "Your side is simple. You are mine. You wear my ring. You live in my house. You attend my events. And you make the world believe that I am so captivated by you that I forgot who I was." "Why?" Evelyn asked, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "Why go to this trouble? You could hire a model, an actress. Why a waitress who hates you?" Dante's eyes narrowed slightly. He reached out his fingers, grazing her chin, tilting her face up to the light. "Because actresses act, Evelyn. They are fake. But you..." His thumb brushed the fading bruise on her cheek where the slap had landed. "You have fear in your eyes, and hatred, and desperation. Those are real emotions, and the world knows I don't do nice. If I'm going to marry someone, it wouldn't be a smiling doll. It would be someone who looks at me the way you are looking at me right now." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. He didn't ask. He simply took her left hand. "Stand up." Evelyn stood, her legs trembling. Dante opened the box. Inside sat a diamond so large it looked vulgar, an emerald-cut stone that caught the light and fractured it into rainbows. It was beautiful, and it was a shackle. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was cold and heavy. It fit perfectly. "Does it fit?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "Good." Dante didn't let go of her hand. He pulled her a step closer, erasing the space between them. "Rule number 1, Evelyn. We are never seen apart in public. Rule number 2, you never question me in front of my men. Rule number 3. He lowered his head, his lips brushing against the shell of her ear. Evelyn's breath hitched. "Rule number 3. You are no longer Evelyn Vance, the waitress. You are Evelyn Moretti. And that means you are a target. From this moment on, your life is in more danger than you can comprehend. If you try to run, my enemies will find you before I do. And they won't be as gentle." He pulled back, staring into her wide, terrified eyes. "Welcome to the family, cara mia." Suddenly, the elevator doors pinged open behind them. "Dante, we have a problem." A man burst into the room. He was younger than Dante, with wilder hair and a blood-stained shirt. He looked frantic. "The Russians," the man panted, ignoring Evelyn. "They hit the warehouse in the Bronx. They know." Dante's face didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't look at the man. He kept his eyes locked on Evelyn. "Silas," Dante called out calmly. The massive driver stepped out of the shadows. "Take my fiancée to the estate." Dante ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. "Lock her in the master suite. Put 2 guards on the door. No one goes in. No one comes out." "Dante." "What's happening?" Evelyn asked, panic rising. Dante finally released her hand. He turned to the window, looking out at the city he ruled. "The war I told you about." Dante adjusted his cuffs. "It just started. Get her out of here. Now." The ride to the estate was a blur of rain-slicked asphalt and suffocating silence. Silas, the driver, didn't speak a word. He drove the armored SUV like a tank commander, navigating a minefield, his eyes constantly flicking to the rear-view mirror. Evelyn sat in the back, the heavy diamond ring on her finger, feeling less like jewelry and more like a shackle. She twisted it round and round, the cold metal biting into her skin. She had sold herself. She had sold her freedom for Leo's life. It was a trade she would make 1,000 times over. But now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality of her situation was settling in like a heavy fog. They left the city behind, driving north into the dense, wooded hills of the Hudson Valley. The scenery grew wilder, the houses fewer and farther between. Finally, they reached a pair of massive wrought-iron gates, easily 20 feet tall, topped with spikes that looked sharp enough to impale a man. Silas rolled down the window and punched a code into a keypad. A red laser scanned his face. The gates groaned open with a heavy mechanical shudder. "Where are we?" Evelyn asked, her voice small in the cavernous interior of the car. "Home." Silas grunted. "The fortress." As they wound up the long tree-lined driveway, the house came into view. It was a sprawling mansion of grey stone, reminiscent of a Gothic cathedral stripped of its mercy. It had turrets and high arched windows, but there was no warmth to it. Floodlights cut through the gloom, and Evelyn could see men patrolling the perimeter, men with assault rifles slung over their chests and German shepherds straining at leashes. This wasn't a home. It was a stronghold. The car stopped under the portico. Silas opened her door. "Inside, quickly. The boss doesn't like you exposed." Evelyn stepped out, clutching her bag. The air here was cleaner than in the city, smelling of pine and damp earth, but it was freezing. She was met at the massive oak double doors by an older woman, with a face like crumpled paper and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a severe black dress and a white apron. "I am Martha," the woman said, her voice clipped. "Housekeeper, follow me. Mr. Moretti gave instructions that you are to be taken directly to the master suite." "The master suite?" Evelyn stammered as she followed Martha across the marble foyer. "Is there a guest room? I don't want to intrude." Martha stopped on the grand staircase and turned, looking down at Evelyn with a mixture of pity and sternness. "There are no guests in this house, Miss Vance. You are the fiancée. You sleep where he sleeps. That is the rule." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She followed Martha up the stairs down a long corridor lined with brooding oil paintings of men who looked like Dante ancestors, perhaps all with the same cold, predatory eyes. Martha opened a set of double doors at the end of the hall. "Dinner will be brought up to you. Do not leave this room. The security system is armed. If you step into the hallway without a clearance code, the alarms will trigger and the lockdown protocol will seal the floor. Do you understand?" "Yes," Evelyn whispered. "Good." Martha stepped out and closed the door. Evelyn heard the distinct click of a heavy lock sliding into place. She was a prisoner. Evelyn turned to face the room. It was magnificent and terrifying. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. There was a king-sized bed with black silk sheets, a mahogany desk cluttered with papers, and a wall of windows that looked out over the dark grounds. It smelled like him. Cedarwood rain and expensive tobacco. Evelyn walked to the window, pressing her hand against the glass. Below she could see the guards moving like ghosts in the mist. She was trapped in a castle, and the dragon was coming home. Hours passed. The rain turned into a storm, lashing against the glass. Evelyn didn't eat the food Martha had brought. She sat in a velvet armchair facing the door, her knees pulled to her chest, waiting. It was past 2:00 a.m. when the lock clicked again. Evelyn jolted upright. The door swung open, and Dante Moretti walked in. He looked different. The pristine suit from the morning was gone. He was wearing a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck. His hair was wet, plastered to his forehead, but it was the blood that made Evelyn gasp. There was a dark, wet stain spreading across the white bandage wrapped hastily around his left forearm. His knuckles were raw and bruised. He stopped when he saw her, his chest heaving slightly. The energy coming off him was jagged, violent. He looked like a man who had just walked out of a war zone. "You're awake," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You're bleeding," Evelyn whispered, standing up involuntarily. Her waitress instincts, the part of her that spent years taking care of a sick brother, kicked in before her fear could stop her. "It's nothing," Dante dismissed, walking past her toward the bathroom. "A scratch." "That's not a scratch, Dante. That's soaking through the bandage." He paused, turning slowly to look at her. His eyes were wild, the adrenaline of the night still coursing through him. "And what do you care, Kara? You got what you wanted. Leo is safe. You're in a mansion. Go to sleep." He swayed slightly on his feet. Evelyn didn't think. She crossed the room and grabbed his uninjured arm to steady him. He flinched, his muscles coiling under her touch like steel cables. But he didn't pull away. "Sit down," she ordered, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. "I've been changing Leo's dressings for 2 years. I know how to handle a wound. Sit." Dante stared at her for a long moment, searching her face. Then the tension in his shoulders dropped an inch. He sat on the edge of the bed, wincing. Evelyn ran into the bathroom and returned with a first aid kit she found under the sink. She knelt between his legs, the expensive fabric of his trousers brushing against her arms. "This is going to sting," she murmured, peeling back the blood-soaked gauze. It was a knife wound, long, shallow, but ugly. Dante didn't make a sound as she cleaned it with antiseptic. He didn't look at his arm. He looked at her. He watched the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way her gentle hands moved with practiced efficiency. "Why are you doing this?" Dante asked quietly. The anger was gone, replaced by genuine curiosity. Most people would let me bleed out. I'm not most people, Evelyn said, applying a fresh bandage and securing it with tape. And I don't like blood on the silk sheets. It's impossible to get out. Dante let out a short, dry laugh. It was the most human sound she had heard him make. There, she said, sitting back on her heels. It needs stitches, but that will hold for tonight. She went to stand up, but Dante's hand shot out, catching her wrist. The air in the room shifted instantly. The clinical atmosphere vanished, replaced by a thick, suffocating heat. He pulled her closer until she was standing directly between his knees, her face inches from his. She could feel the heat radiating off him. "You are a strange creature, Evelyn Vance," he murmured, his thumb tracing the pulse point on her wrist. "You fear me, yet you tend to my wounds." Evelyn's breath hitched. "I'm holding up my end of the deal. You keep Leo alive. I play the part." "The part," Dante repeated. His eyes dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Do you know why I brought you here tonight? Why the security is tripled?" "Because of the Russians. Because there is a traitor," Dante said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Someone inside my organization gave them the location of the warehouse. Someone close to me." Evelyn went cold. "That means," Dante continued, tightening his grip on her wrist, "that I cannot trust anyone. Not my guards, not my drivers, not even my captains." He stood up, towering over her, forcing her to look up at him. "The only person in this house I know isn't the rat, is you." "Me," Evelyn breathed. "Why? Because you have no allegiance to this world. You hate it, and I own the only thing you love." He reached out and switched off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness, illuminated only by the dying fire. "Get in the bed, Evelyn." "What?" Panic flared in her chest. "Dante, the contract said you do what I say." He cut her off. He walked around to the other side of the bed and began unbuttoning his shirt. "I need to sleep. I need to recover. And if anyone comes through that door tonight to finish what they started in the Bronx, I need to know you are right where I can reach you." He lay down on top of the covers, sliding a handgun from his waistband and placing it under his pillow. He looked at her, patting the empty space beside him. "I won't touch you," he said, his voice weary. "But you will sleep beside me. Tonight you are not just a fiancé. You are my alibi, and you are my witness." Evelyn hesitated, looking at the door, then at the man who held her life in his hands. She realized then that the danger wasn't just outside the gates. It was right here, in this bed. She climbed in, lying stiffly on the far edge of the mattress, her back to him. "Good night, Evelyn," Dante murmured in the dark. She didn't answer. She lay awake, listening to the rain and the steady, deep breathing of the monster beside her, unaware that outside the door, a shadow moved silently away from the keyhole. The traitor was already inside the house, and the game had only just begun. Who is the traitor inside the Moretti mansion? Did Dante bring Evelyn there for her protection, or is he using her as bait to flush out the rat? And now that they are forced to share a bed, how long can Evelyn keep the walls around her heart from crumbling? Dante thinks he bought a fiancée, but he might have just brought home the one woman who can bring him to his knees. If you are hooked on this story,